Welcome to February, a frosty month full of gray skies, wintry weather, and no notable holidays for wizard apprentices like myself. It's times like this where I like to warm my cold heart with the magical flames of some good anime, but my dealer's out of town, so we'll have to take our shot with whatever we have lying around in the bag. Months come and go, but much like my relationship status, the rules for this series don't change. 3 anime are bestowed to me by the random anime generator, and I give them 3 episodes to grab my attention. If I like what I see, I'll see them through to completion, and if not, they get cast back out into the wintry weather for someone else to worry about. The world's my oyster, so long as it doesn't have more episodes than February has days, but with that in mind, let's see what I'll swipe right on this month. Looking back, I have talked about romance anime in some capacity for 5 episodes now. I guess now's as good a time as any to talk about them, but still, that's a lot. I don't think there's a whole lot left that I haven't already said about this topic, but I guess as long as these kinds of shows keep coming up, I'm gonna have to find some new ways to approach them. Then again, on second thought, if they can't be bothered to innovate, neither can I. This is a mutual relationship after all. 2023's A Galaxy Next Door came out in a rather packed season for quality romance anime, and if you saw it last spring in the seasonal charts and wondered why nobody talked about it, allow me to enlighten you. Ichiro Kuga is a young budding shoujo mangaka who's tasked with raising his kid siblings after their father passes away, sustaining himself on what money he makes from his work and rent from the apartment complex that his father left him. His manga isn't exactly the best-selling work out there, so to hopefully give him some help, his higher-ups send him a new assistant in the form of a young Shiori Goshiki, a certified polite rich girl among polite rich girls with a knack for drawing manga, a skill that she picked up and mastered in a week after reading a how-to-draw shoujo manga book. Everything's going swimmingly until some supernatural shenanigans go down, and now Ichiro and Shiori are destined to get married. Only Shiori doesn't want the love of her life to be decided by accident, so she insists they must first fall in love with each other before tying the knot. And where have I heard that one before? Forgive me, as I do like to lead off these segments with what I liked about the show in question, but in the case of A Galaxy Next Door, there really isn't much of that. I mean, I guess the show's art is decent, and it doesn't quite hurt to watch, and I guess the overall writing is pretty fine, but if there's one thing that drags the show down, it's just how overly safe it feels. None of its cast have a particularly strong personality, besides being good people with good intentions, and the manga author MC trope has been so done to death at this point that it feels like a creative shorthand to take when you don't have any other good ideas. It's an issue made worse by a lack of a particularly strong dynamic or chemistry in its leads, leading the plot to just kind of meander along with the same enthusiasm as a state-funded construction worker who gets paid by the hour. I'm certainly not averse to slower romances or stories without dramatic hooks, but you really have to sell me on the strength of your characters to do so, and A Galaxy Next Door is just not able to do even that. End result is about as flavorful as wet paper products. Enough said. The late 2010s kinda scared me. Started watching anime in 2015 and started to get into the community about a year later in 2016, and then really started to swear by the seasonal charts more around 2020. It basically means I'm familiar enough with the anime of the late 2010s to have picked out most of the good shows in my free time, but whenever a title arises that I've never heard of before, you better believe I'm worried. By 2017, a lot of the Battle Academy shows at the start of the decade were starting to phase out, while Isekai still hadn't quite oversaturated the market as it has in more recent years, which is kind of a long way of saying that there's no guarantees either on what you're going to get or how good it's going to be genre-wise. Chronos Ruler follows the father-son pair of the very poorly named Victor and Wu Putin, who are going around fighting evil time demons known as Horologs in the hopes of one day finding the demon who stole Victor's time before he loses it all. See, Horologs are these time demons that like to eat people's time, making them rapidly de-age, but people who have taken something called an oath of truth can fight them by speeding up or slowing down time, and also some people like Victor get cursed and time acts all funky so that he has to write stuff in his notebook because his powers might make him forget his memory and something like that. Ugh. My ears perk up just about whenever a series starts talking about themes of time, memory, and regret, and despite its at times convoluted power system, as shown earlier, Chronos Ruler does put together a pretty solid first episode to introduce the main duo as they help a schoolgirl named Koyuki Honda. She serves as a nice grounding for the more essential parts of the main cast, and it kinda sucks that she's only around for one episode. The CG work is a little in your face, but with some solid demon designs and a decent grasp on its themes, the show definitely shows potential for being half decent. Unfortunately, I can't really say the same for episodes 2 and 3, which feel like they largely discard a lot of the better parts of the first episode and keep the weaker ones. Despite a pretty time-tested dynamic between our male leads, the duo is largely one note and struggle to really handle their more dramatic scenes. The series' solution to this is to move into a more serialized plot, starting the second episode that keeps a lot of the drama, and a secondary cast that rely too heavily on single gimmicks to be particularly noteworthy. The show starts to drag out its ideas more and more, to the point where Victor talking about his lost time comes off as more goofy than serious, and its 2010s shonen sensibilities aren't exactly helping much here either. There's definitely the skeleton of a good idea buried in here somewhere, it just becomes a question of how much you're willing to sit through in order to find it. Maybe this is all just a big waste of time. The only thing more cursed than Hollywood video game adaptations might just be when anime does it. Actually, no, I take that back since Hollywood is way worse at it, but it's not exactly a compliment to anime based on video games either. The two mediums have a long history of not exactly melding well together, and while some names like Pokemon, Edge Runners, and Uma Musume certainly prove it isn't impossible to adapt them well, there are a lot more duds out there than there are successes. The history of the Devil May Cry franchise is a bit rocky, but if you spend some time in video game circles, you're probably at least familiar with its electric, lovably arrogant main character Dante. That, or you are an avid consumer of memes, either works. While no television series is ever going to be able to match the slick combat mechanics of the series, Dante is the kind of character that just feels perfect for the silver screen. I imagine that was the thought process behind the new DMC animated project Netflix announced last fall, but older and more dedicated fans may remember that this isn't the first attempt to bring Dante to anime. Back in 2007, Madhouse of all people took a stab at this franchise, and it sure is something. I'm sure most are somewhat familiar with or could piece together the story to Devil May Cry, but for those that don't, the story follows Demon Slayer Dante as he, slays demons, alongside his slightly annoying new sidekick Patty Lowell, and that's kind of about it. I've already covered a number of series from the 2000s on this series before, but boy, does this one really show its age. DMC released about a year after Hellsing Ultimate started its run in 2006, an OVA also done in part by Madhouse, and a year before A1 Pictures' Black Butler in 2008. It was a time where these dark action fantasies were a lot more common, and you can see a lot of similarities in the finished products. As a more episodic story, DMC does have a pretty decent side cast and some decent episodic plots to hold itself together, and some decent animation and visuals to boot. The OP is kind of ass, but for a genre piece, it works reasonably well. Reasonably being the key word there, the first episode is a little all over the place and hard to sit through. You can see where the writers couldn't quite figure out how to make things work, as some scenes relieve their dramatic tension way too early, and demon reveals can be almost comical at times. Episode 1 features a lengthy train scene that I guess is meant to reinforce just how cool Dante is and how bad the demons are, but it's way too short to pull off any of that as the plot quickly jumps off to its next set piece. The result is that demons feel cartoonishly juvenile in a way that most other shows at the time equally struggled with, but also Dante doesn't always come off as the confident badass that he ought to be. The show draws strong similarities to Hellsing, but can't stand to Alucard just being a generally more interesting protagonist. To its credit, the second and third episodes do clean things up quite nicely, but it still feels missing something to make this adaptation really stand out amongst the other series of the time, which just feels like a devastating fate for a protagonist with as much potential as Dante has. I guess on the bright side, he hasn't yet started fighting Nazis in the Catholic Church. Probably should have jinxed it. Despite walking into it with moderate expectations, I still found a way to be let down by Galaxy Next Door, and down it went. The flat presentation, both its characters and art, leave a lot to be desired, and in a market as saturated as the romance genre, I will definitely not be losing sleep over this one. As I mentioned at the end of the full segment, Chronos Ruler rather surprisingly does have the skeleton of a half-decent series buried somewhere in its messy execution. Ordinarily, if the show had some sense for where it was going, that first episode alone would have been enough to sell me on the whole thing. However, the failings of the second and third episodes snuffed my interest enough to see it added to the drop list. If I want a show to talk about themes of the passing of time, memories, and regret, I'm just gonna go wait for the next episode of Freedom. Sorry, not sorry. Conversely, Devil May Cry had an extremely weak start, but cleaned up a little better in its second and third episodes. I'm sure that keeps going, and it ends up being somewhere kind of decent, but it fails to strongly differentiate itself from its contemporaries, and for a DMC adaptation, it deserves so much more. Here's hoping that Netflix adaptation turns out better. With that, I once again hope you enjoyed the video. I'm honestly surprised we got 8 episodes in before completely striking out, but that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Lord knows the random anime generator will do whatever it feels like. I hope it was helpful in narrowing down your planning list, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. And head over to my channel page to catch up on any previous episodes you might have missed. Follow me on the social media, hopefully linked down below, if you want even more from me, and until next time, remember to stay salty.